You know, this is a conversation about courageous leadership in this moment in time. And what I can tell you is there's not much more I have to say after what I just said. I feel like the speech that I just gave was the setup for this conversation to talk about the bold leadership that's required in this moment in time. And I couldn't think of two better women than Aaliyah and Skye to come and share their stories with all of you. They're both examples of courageous leaders working inside and outside of education. And what they remind us is that institutional power structures concede nothing without pressure and demand from the people. They also remind us that we don't choose the moment when we have to lead boldly or courageously. The moment chooses us. And they both are going to share stories with you all about what that means and how that's shown up in their work. And so I just want to say thank you so much for the choices you've made, the hard choices you've made to stand up fiercely and boldly, to stand up for justice, and to stand up for the future of both education and our society. And so what I'll just say is just a quick note. We are going to do audience Q&A. We have a QR code that's going to come up at some point that you can then, go through the prompts to submit your questions, because I know you're going to have some questions for these amazing women. So what I'd love just to get started with is if you could just both introduce yourself and tell me a bit more about what drew you to the work that you're doing at CASEL and Democracy Forward.
So good morning, everyone. Aaliyah Samuel, and it's hard to believe that this is my 25th year in public education. I actually cut my teeth in education as a special education teacher, went on to become an assistant principal. And during my principalship, I realized, one, all these policies were coming down that were impacting literally my ability to lead my school building. And there were so few educators at the policy table, so I decided to leave my principalship and get into education policy. Little did I know that that would really be kind of the catalyst for the last 15 years of my career. And I was a presidential appointee at the U.S. Department of Education in 2021. For those of you who remember 2021, 98% of the nation's schools were still closed or virtual due to the pandemic. And we were the landing team coming in. It was before the secretary was appointed, before the DepSec. And we were charged with getting every single school open within the first 100 days of the administration. Now, mind you, I had never in a million years thought I would be a presidential appointee, to be clear. I started off as an educator, but just fortunate events. And as we were reopening schools, and mind you, I had a first grader and a fourth grader at home on virtual school while also serving in the administration and also serving as a senior fellow at Harvard. So I had a lot going on. And traveling across the nation, whether it was a rural district in Tennessee, or Nashville, or in North Carolina, every place we went to talk to the leadership around reopening schools, from the gubernatorial level, the chief state school officer, the superintendent, the principal, the teacher, there was one common thread. And the illuminating moment was a veteran teacher, 35 years in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, said to me, you know, Dr. Samuel, we can't return to school until we return to our relationships. Bingo, the light went off. Well, as my tenure at the administration ended, CASEL was looking for its next leader, and I have an uncanny ability to pick difficult jobs at moments. So I left the administration to join CASEL, and this was at the time there was a lot of heat being applied around, is SEL critical race theory? Is SEL the Trojan horse? And so I left the administration to come because I knew how important, both as a teacher and principal, relationships were, these SEL skills were to academics, but also in the future. And so that is what ultimately drew me to this work. And we have been at it since 2022. I've been in this role now. And really the last few years have prepared us for what is happening right now. And I'll share a little bit more about some of the infrastructure and work that we did to prepare ourselves for this moment.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Skye Perryman. I'm a lawyer, but I came to being a lawyer through a love for educators and what I saw in the public schools that I went to as a child in Texas. I'm a product of K through 12 public education, and then in college when I worked in public schools and communities that were underserved and saw the real power that I worked with a federally funded program, real power that the government support of our public education system can make in the lives of people. I thought about being an educator and then started realizing that so much of the policy that impacts our education system occurs in halls of government and in courtrooms across the country. And so that led me to go to law school. And I always maintained a very robust public interest practice when I was the corporate litigator. But then in the wake of the 2016 election, when it became clear in the early months of 2017 that this country, while it has never truly achieved the democracy that we wish to have, was in a really critical spot where the fight was no longer whether we were going to be able to achieve something we have never achieved, but whether we were even going to be able to hold on to the hard-fought gains that this country has achieved in order to make it more inclusive and responsive to people. And so that led me to leave my corporate role and to be on the founding litigation team of an organization that had no website, that had no notoriety, that had no office space at the early times in 2017. And so I joined Democracy Forward as a lawyer on the litigation team. I then became the general counsel of a large association dedicated to the health of women and girls. And then after January 6th, 2021, when it became clear that these threats to democracy and to people and communities and to our shared future were not going away just because an election cycle might have turned a different way, but were really with us in this new paradigm shift moment. The board of Democracy Forward asked if I would come back as the president and CEO to scale and build the organization to address the very threats that we're now seeing at the federal level, and then of course in states and communities across the country. And so beginning about 18 months ago, our team at Democracy Forward, because we do so much work in states and communities on behalf of educators and parents and teachers, we started seeing these movements and these efforts to really undermine a shared future. We started seeing that they were becoming much more prominent even at the national level with the production of Project 2025 and other policy documents. There was no question in our mind that these were serious proposals that if the federal landscape regressed, we would be looking at accelerations of these very harmful proposals. And so we began prepping to see what rights people and communities and educators and parents and students and teachers would have should the federal executive seek to dismantle the Department of Education, seek to remove so many of the progress that we made. And so over the past 100 or so days, our organization has filed more than 60 legal actions, including winning court orders that have blocked the enforcement of the so-called Dear Colleague letter. We are waiting on a ruling in our case challenging the dismantling of the Department of Education. We are seeking to restore IES grants and waiting on a ruling there. And I can go on and on about the wins that we have had, and we have had the major wins because people, teachers, parents, school districts, people have been willing to step in when in many instances national leaders have not. And so we are honored every single day to get to do our modest part to be able to make sure that people in communities have representation in courts and in communities across the country.
Thank you so much, Skye. And what I love about what you shared is that, I don't know if you all know this, but the litigation work that they're doing, they're offering this all free of charge, right? So as they're filing all these lawsuits, as they're engaging with all these people, they're doing this really to preserve the future of our democracy and doing it on behalf of all of us. And it's part of the reason why Skye became named one of Time's 100 most impactful, influential leaders. So congratulations on that recent honor. But Aaliyah, and I know you didn't include this in your overview remarks too, like so much of the work that you've been doing right now has been to actively, proactively push back on how the administration is trying to associate social-emotional learning with discriminatory practices. And what I'd love for both of you to talk about, right? It's like you didn't say, okay, this EO is coming out, I'm gonna back down, let me fight it. Like you have been making proactive decisions to push back on something that is just purely incorrect, right? And so what I'd love to hear, maybe you can start off, Aaliyah, is like, talk to me a little bit more about that work. Talk to me about maybe a recent victory that you've had, and then maybe Skye, you can then share one of the more recent lawsuits and victories that you've had.
So we often get asked the question, how did SEL even get embroiled in this whole conversation? Like, how in the world did this even happen? So I'm gonna just kind of take us back a little bit to then spring us forward. So back in 2021, there was a series of national tweets that started to go out saying SEL was a Trojan horse for critical race theory. And what was the catalyst of that is, at the time, there were active efforts to try to find critical race theory in state standards, in curriculum, in the K-12 system, and we all know who the they is, could not find critical race theory in K-12 curriculum because it does not exist. But what they did find in state standards, infant and toddler developmental guidelines, in portraits of a graduate, was language around social emotional learning, around agency, around identity, around belonging. And so what happened is that language was then packaged up to say, critical race theory is the theory. How it's implemented is through SEL. That's how we then became labeled as the Trojan horse, et cetera, et cetera. It was an active attempt to say, we can't find this, we found this, let's intentionally link the two. And so when I came on, we were really in the thick of the national headline after headline after headline around SEL being the Trojan horse, or SEL being coded critical race theory. And so at that time, we had a very reactive position. And you know, they say if you're explaining, you're losing. We were doing a lot of work explaining, and we realized we've got to shift this narrative and shift it quickly. Also, part of the reason why I came to CASEL is because there was a recognition that we had to fight, it had to be a public battle, we had to fight the policies, and it had to be at the national level, because what we were hearing from our district partners is, we are getting hammered by the politics. It is a chilling effect. We need you all to engage at the national level and provide political cover for us so that we can continue to do the work. So over the course of really the first probably 5 months of my tenure, we started to establish what we call now as the Leading with SEL Coalition, because we cannot do this work alone. Our Leading with SEL Coalition, it's about 45 national organizations, from the National Math Teachers Association, National Literacy Association, elementary principals, secondary principals, guidance counselors, school psychologists, Superintendents Association, PTA, NPU. A huge shout out to Carrie Rodriguez, who is, I think, right here, an amazing parent leader if you don't know her. And we realized we've got to stabilize and also mobilize. And so our Leading with SEL Coalition met over the summer of 2022 to say, okay, we've got to get game ready for this back to school. We have to have coordinated messaging. We've got to be ready to go from both a policy perspective, a comms perspective, because the battle that we're fighting is one of communication. And so we spent some time getting ourselves together to really come out hard in the fall. That fall, I did a congressional hearing. It was my second hearing, and if you've ever seen those, I mean, there's a massive amount of work that happens, but also the questions, you never know what's going to come to you. But we had our coalition ready to go. So once that back to school hearing was done at the federal level, we had over 45 national partners with millions of members ready to all say the same thing, tweet the same thing, communicate the same thing. And when we pushed that go button, we flooded the network. That was the beginning of the shifting of the tides. And so really for the last 2.5 years, we've been very intentional ensuring that we're building the infrastructure, because we were also seeing what was happening politically. To your point, you're reading the tea leaves, you're watching the discourse. We had the 2022 midterms. Like, we were watching everything strategically because we knew, one, we need to have a strong infrastructure ready to go. That meant utilizing our collaborating states initiatives, which are state leaders in education, all ready to go, same language, understanding how to communicate, understanding the dialogue that needed to happen at the state level. Through our community network partners, which is a consortium of district leaders across the nation, ready to go, same messaging, ready to be able to fight back and hold the ground, to even our SEL fellows, which are individual educators who are partners with us to be able to, at the school building level, lean in. We also formed a very tight connection with the National Parents Union and PTA, who were like, we're gonna mobilize parents. So all of that work prepared us for then watching the presidential campaigns the end of last year. And we knew there were two different pathways we had to prepare ourselves for. And we did. We said, okay, there's scenario A, scenario B. We've got to be ready to go for either one. Well, once it was clear which scenario we had to work under, we were ready. And the team also knew, we called it, ironically, like the nuclear option. There was going to be a moment where we were going to have to press the button and be ready to go. And that call came Saturday, March 1st. I was in Durham, North Carolina with my family. My 14-year-old was doing his first college visit, and my phone rang at 7 a.m. in the morning. And I travel with my phone, I travel with my computer. It's like part of me because it's the reality of the work right now. You're on 24/7. And I got a call from my VP of policy, and she said, Aaliyah, you've got to see this FAQ that just dropped. It is essentially saying SEL is discriminatory and outlawing SEL. You've got to see this. Hit the ground, read it, and we said, it's time to go. And we knew at that moment it was no more games being played. We had to come out strong. We thank goodness for our national partners who got on the phone with us over the weekend, and literally we were rolling, ready for Monday morning. Monday morning, we had our public statement ready to go. We had our partner statement ready to go. And once that hit the network, we knew we had stood firm. And it was ironic, it's one of those moments as a leader where you kind of have that pit in your stomach because you're like, this is the point where you can no longer hide and you have to be ready for whatever is gonna come. And I had already been, attacked in different cyber attacks in different ways. So you're ready. And also never in a million years, a nonprofit who has dedicated the last 30 years to social emotional learning, did we think we would have to go against the federal government? Like, you don't prepare for that, that's honest confusion to this day. But it was a real reality, and it was also the moment that we knew there was absolutely no turning back. And it is because of our partners like Democracy Forward, like our coalition that said, we are here for you. And as a result of that singular statement, I'll give you an example. We had a state chief send us a personal letter thanking us for not only our public statement, but our statement to the U.S. Department of Education, the statement that went to the Hill to say, because of your work, I can now stand firm in my state and tell my superintendents to continue to push forward, impacting hundreds of students in that state. So when I say it is real on an emotional level, on a physical level, but it's not just the burden and the weight that we carry as leaders, it's also our teams who are in the thick of this every day with the reality. So, it was just one of the huge policy wins, and then I'll talk about the declaration a little later as well. But truly, we could not continue to advocate on the behalf of our students and our educators without organizations like Democracy Forward.
Thank you for sharing that. And what I'll just highlight from that story, what you talked so much about was, your courage, but the plan that you had, the strategy you had, the vision, right? Okay, if it's scenario A, it's scenario B, if it's a nuclear option, right? But also the ways in which you were activating your entire community, right? Like, again, like we cannot do this work, this very hard work, this very challenging work on our own. And Skye, like, you're on the front lines of so much of the litigation right now related to education. So like dismantling the Department of Ed, you have lawsuits related to the federal funding freezes, right? Tell us more, like what are some of the cases that you're focused on right now? What are you learning as you are in the courtroom, as you're filing, as you're making your arguments?
Well, one thing I'll say, you said earlier, and I wrote it down because I thought it was so good, I just borrow things from people.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine.
You said community is healing, and I think that is right, but we also know that community is courage. And
Yes.
I just want to emphasize, because so many of you in this room, and then of course on the stage, have had such a role in what we are doing and seeing now. And so I'll talk about some of what we're working on and some of the wins and some of the things to come. First, let me say there is not a single federal court in this country that has looked at it as a substantive matter at what the administration has done with respect to education and said that they have the authority to do what they are seeking to do, okay? So there is not a single federal court in this country as of today that has sided with the administration on any substantive issue involving how they are seeking to engage with education in this country. And in a number, let's applause, we gotta get our wins where we can. And in a number of cases, including one of our most recent wins, blocking the Dear Colleague letter, judges who were appointed by President Trump himself and confirmed by the Senate have ruled against the administration in these preliminary and early motions. Do we get an applause for that? So this is something that transcends the types of politics that people may ascribe to what is going on in the country. It is the type of thing that transcends what far-right extreme leaders will want to call polarization. We know in this country that the country is not as polarized as people may seek to have us believe, that actually the vast majority of the American people, whether they are conservative or liberal or progressive or moderate, the vast majority of the American people reject the proposals that we saw in Project 2025, including on education, which is why, of course, in the campaign season, you had no one really willing to admit that Project 2025 was part of their plans, right? Because it was a political hot potato, as it should be, because so many people oppose it. And so our work, it has not been just about making the arguments that we know how to make in court. And when we talk about the courts, by the way, we're not talking about a silver bullet. We don't believe the courts are going to save American democracy or American society. When we talk about the courts, what we're talking about is the ability of people and communities in this country to use the power that our democracy affords them, which is the power to enforce your rights, including against your government, if you need to, in order to be able to create a path for a shared future. That is what we mean when we are litigating, right? We're not just doing it for the legal textbooks, and we're not just doing it because we're some naive people that don't understand who is all in these courts. It is a way of people to use their collective power, and in so doing stop a lot of harm and expose what is happening in ways where people can use their power to mobilize, which is of course what you've seen with what CASEL and others have been leading and doing. And so we have a few things I would highlight. One, a very similar story to the March 1st story was in the early days of the administration when at noon, and you all will remember this, there was an announcement from the White House that no one was anticipating, it wasn't in Project 2025, that said by 5 p.m. tomorrow, we are going to freeze all federal funding across the country, which is not a funding freeze, it is an essential services freeze. It is the type of freeze that would affect Meals on Wheels and Head Start programs and a number of programs in your schools and in your communities. And our team, because of the planning and preparation, was able to mobilize, get into court and block that. But importantly, we did that, and the order still remains, We did that because there were people in communities that were willing to mobilize quickly. And what we have seen is that community is courage, and courage truly is contagious. And at a time, by the way, when institutions, including our higher ed institutions like Harvard, were not the first ones in court or the first ones standing up, we saw people in communities and associations of teachers and parents, small businesses, cities, show up in court and show the way. And that has paved the way for other institutions to start following suit, which is so important. So we want everyone to join the Courage Parade. So the cases that we are focused on with respect to education particularly, we have brought cases to challenge the dismantling of the Department of Education, which I know Aaliyah will talk about, where we are working with a broad coalition and waiting for that order. Last Friday, we won a court order blocking the government-wide reductions in force across the federal government because the president does not have the authority to decimate the federal government without Congress. And that will help so many of our policymakers. We've blocked the national funding freeze. We have a few cases on education-specific grants. We won the first court order, and this was before the higher ed institutions of higher learning they were finding their way, but on behalf of the American Association of University Professors and many other organizations, NADAHE and many others, we were able to win the first court order, finding that the president's crusade against diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility is actually a violation of our First Amendment rights, because you don't get to say in this country that there are ideas that can't be talked about or that there are perspectives that cannot be pursued. And so those cases are continuing to proceed. And then you'll see a number of cases in the coming days. And so again, and I know we'll probably get to this in the Q&A, what we want people to see about our work isn't just the courtroom wins. It's the courage that people in communities are finding to use their power in this moment, because every single time we file a case, and then when we have the fortune of winning court orders, which we are doing before all types of judges, right, including judges that the president himself appointed, when we have those opportunities, it gives people an ability to take a beat, to get themselves and their communities organized, and to be able to also engage in the type of mass people mobilization that we need in this moment, and that will be able to use the crisis that we're in this country as a catalyst for real change.
As you can see, this is why I wanted them both up here to share their stories, right? Because they're talking about, these are not amazing, preordained leaders. These are everyday people who are saying, no, this isn't right, and stepping up to do something about it. And so I just so appreciate how you're bringing that to life. And also, come find Skye, come find her team. Let's think about, are there others out here who are thinking about taking some steps? I'm gonna switch gears just a little bit. Aaliyah, I wanna move it more to like the personal for a second. So I know you and I had many conversations over the last couple of months where you were like, I'm being trolled, my organization is being trolled. I'm on a Moms for Liberty presentation where I'm personally being called out. I'll let you tell the rest of the story about what the personal impacts have been, so you can tell it in the way you want to tell it. But, you're also just trying to run your organization, right? Like CASEL is a nonprofit organization with growth goals and fundraising goals, and you have a team, and you're trying to put out great research, and then all of this is happening, right? Can you let us in a little bit to understand how you've navigated those hard moments? Like, I have to imagine you were thinking about, should I compromise on some of this? But compromise might feel like betrayal, right? Do I stand out? Do I be convicted? Like, should I be convicted? But what are the costs gonna be to me, to my organization, to my family, to my staff if I do so? How did you weigh that risk? How did you weigh that trade-off? I will say that is a question that's been coming up the most from our community as people thinking about how to move in this moment.
So, it's interesting. I can talk in front of groups of thousands of people, and it doesn't impact me the same way. That singular question has my heart rate like just pounding out of my chest. I can't wait to see what my ring data says about it's probably like an EKG right now. But you mentioned compartmentalization earlier, just being able to compartmentalize. That has been the only way I have survived these last 4 years. This is my 4th year in this role. And I remember the first time in 2022, our comms person came to me and said, Aaliyah, I'm gonna show you a picture, but I need you to not get upset about it because I don't have social media. I have LinkedIn Premium, go to LinkedIn people, and I have Facebooks, as the gentleman said. Like, that's it. I don't have Twitter. I don't, it's not my thing. And it was a picture, it was my headshot, and it had stamped Marxist across the top. And it was going around the internet. And I was like, I'm a classroom teacher. I'm a Marxist. Like, it took a second. And that was early spring of 2022. And calmed down for a while, and then that fall we were getting, the following year we were getting ready for bringing our conference back in person. We have an annual conference called The Exchange, and we were doing it in Atlanta. And this was the time when Moms for Liberty in particular had really ramped up around social emotional learning. And we got a call from the security at the Georgia World Congress Center, which is the GWCC out of Atlanta, which is where the conference was. And they said, you know, we need to have a call with your team and your security liaison. And we were like, we don't have a security liaison. They were like, you need to get one, which was like, trigger. So we got a security liaison, and on that call, they said to me, you know, Dr. Samuel, we are going to encourage you to have personal security for this conference. Georgia is an open carry state, and because of the activity around your name, and there's a particular term that they use called tags, the tags to your name on social media of Marxist, indoctrinator, the activity is just too high, it's too close to the conference, and because it is an open carry state and the main areas of the conference are open to the public, it's just not safe for you. I was like, what? What, like, I couldn't even process, like, what are you saying to me? And they were like, you're not safe to move around on your own because of the social media activity and the tags to your name. So we got a security liaison who worked with the GWCC, and I remember the first conversation with my husband. And you know, my husband is clueless as to what I really do. And when I told him, like, here's what's going on, and he was like, my husband's from the South. We met at Tuskegee University. To all the HBCU grads out there. And my husband was like, what? Bet, I'm coming to the conference. And my husband and my sons were at the conference, and all the while it was amazing to have the family support. My husband was there because he was concerned. Like, this is the reality. And in the last few months, there have, the beginning of the year started off like a rocket again. Moms for Liberty has a university, and they spent the entire month of January on social emotional learning. And, you know, I guess they say you make it when people are talking about you, but they had a slide with my headshot, my past jobs, roles, just basically targeting me as public enemy #1 in education. And again, I'm like, I was a teacher. Like, what are you talking about? And I wish that was the only thing. Also, over the last, 2 years, my home information, public speaking engagements have been posted on websites like Rumble. Rumble is one of the sites where a lot of the activists go. And so we've had to hire PII firms to remove my personal information from the website. And what at the end of the day keeps me going is the fact that I was a classroom teacher, the fact that I was a principal. I mean, thank you. And I think about all of the students that truly I have been fortunate to serve, the stories that I know to be real, the parents that I've talked to, the parents within my own community. And I actually, when the administration turned over, I had a conversation with my boys that are 10 and 14. And I said, guys, I know you don't like when mom travels. My 10-year-old in particular takes it hard. I said, but I need you to understand what's happening right now. Right now, work needs more of mom. And the reason being is I want to make sure that boys and girls across the nation, there's about 50 million students across the public education system across the US, have the same opportunities that you do. And I'm burning the candle at both ends. I need to be out there for CASEL, but I also have to do it because I fundamentally know what is right for kids. And I told them, it's going to mean mom is going to be gone a little bit more, but I need you to understand when I'm 80 and in a rocking chair and looking back on history, I know what side I will be on, and that is on the behalf of kids.
Skye, I know your clients are navigating with a lot of these questions. You're navigating with these questions about how far do you go? When do you compromise? When are you out front? You know, what are the hills to die on? Understanding that the risk can be that high. How's that showing up for you? How's it showing up for your clients?
Well, I will say, you know, our clients are so courageous, and many of them do not have the resources that they need in order to be safe, and no one's going to be comfortable in this time, but we do want people safe, and so we're doing a lot to seek to try to find resources to help communities across the country as they're stepping out. Our clients understand what we understand, which is that the cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of acting in this moment, right? And so I think that our clients, and we are so inspired by it, are grounded in that reality, and as a result are able to lead out, to keep calm and carry on, and to move forward. Of course, the president has targeted lawyers. Elon Musk has tweeted about me, about my organization. There have been a range of executive orders seeking to try to prevent our clients from coming into court. There have been a range of executive orders that seek to suggest that lawyers that do the work that the American Bar Association tells us we must do to defend the Constitution and fulfill our oath to the rule of law in this country should be sanctioned. And of course, I am also the mom of a son and have a very supportive family and husband. And you've probably met my lovely friends that travel with us, which we call our friends, who are in a security detail that I have to have. Our organization, the cost of operating it has gone up, because we have to have security. It is public record every time we are in court and we go in, and most times that we go into court, we are doing things that stop abuses of power, and that angers people very much who want to abuse their power. And so it has been you know, something that frankly, if we look back at our history, is not new. But it is new in this moment, and that's not to take away the real personal toll that it takes on our team and on our clients. And then, of course, you know, many of us are not seeing our kids and families as we would wish, but we're doing this for our kids, our families, and for our future. And I think understanding that the cost of inaction is just so much greater than acting in this time, because the world that we are fighting for is a world that can transcend these momentary but very significant challenges. But the world that very extreme and far right and anti-democratic actors are seeking to create is one where this becomes normalized and intensified. And so we really are in a paradigm shift. In 2021, the United States was added to a list of global backsliding democracies as a result of the very misinformation and disinformation that CASEL has had to deal with, and that all of you have had to deal with, as a result of extremism that are in states and communities where many of you all live and work across the country, that now the national conversation is finally paying attention to, and as a result of a range of our institutions that have been pressure tested and have not been stepping up the way that they need to. And we've remained on that list ever since. And so the question really in this last election was not about whether we were going to be able to build a utopia overnight. It was about whether we were going to be able to stop a vastly accelerating backslide, to slow it and to turn it around, or whether we were going to have an even bigger fight on our hands. But the liberating part of where we are, because we are in a paradigm shift, and the liberating part of where we are is that the path is exceedingly clear. And this is for all the funders in the room. There's no way to get on a balance sheet and sort of weigh the risks and the benefits. To your question, the path is exceedingly clear. If we don't act, everything that we have worked for and that people before us worked for will go away. And if we do act, we have a chance to create a better future. And even if we fail in doing that, which I do not believe that we can fail, because truly failure is not an option, we won't have lost our spirit and the best of who we are, because we will know what we have done in this time. And so I think that clarity is actually what has been able. Many of these questions are not hard questions. The magazines and the press will sort of say, oh, you're going to courageously lose hard. These aren't hard questions. What do you do? Tomorrow, everybody across the country is going to lose their ability to access the services they need. Right. Somebody's got to go in and stop it. And somebody's got to stand up for the educators and the career civil servants that are being targeted unfairly every single day. And so that's, I think, how we've been able, staying true to those grounding values, which of course have been so reflected throughout, so much of this morning.
I really appreciate you saying that. And it is a motivating line to leave us with, right? Like we have no choice but to act, right? Because the inaction is worse, right? What are we then saying yes to, right? Instead of thinking about all the things we're saying no to, what are we then saying yes to by not acting? So I've been able to get a couple questions in from the audience.
Great.
Yay, technology. And so I have it here.
Exciting.
It's related to this question because you both were talking very emotionally and very like personally about what the choices have meant for you. And one of our audience members first thanks you both for your leadership and then says, and specifically Skye, in the first 2 weeks of the new administration, I panicked with every new executive order. I learned how to exhale and see democracy forward take action. How do you support your team to exhale? And I'd love, Aaliyah, for you to add on to that. How are you supporting your team through all of this and through all the choices you're making?
Well, this has been a huge part of my work and the work that we're doing at Democracy Forward. So we have a saying at Democracy Forward that when you are tired, it's time to rest, but don't quit. Mm-hmm. And so we have really sought to embed that we normalize in our work. If you got to tap out, this is a relay and you can hand it to somebody else, but we're not going to quit. We're not going to say no to the next thing we need to do because some of our team is burnt out. They need to tap out, and we're going to bring in reinforcements to help you. So it has been a struggle. We just wrapped up a 2-day retreat. I took a red eye last night to get here after that 2-day retreat with our team, which is the first time we've been able to have everybody together. But we are really looking at how we can support people where they are, understanding that there are some weeks and months that some folks are able to really dive in, and there's others where they need to take a step back. And then we're building a diverse and a strong team, being able to draw from so many experiences that are able to allow. So we really look at it as a relay. And again, if you were tired, rest, but don't quit. And that's what we really focus on at Democracy Forward.
I love that, the relay race.
Yeah, we've been hit with a lot with the chilling effect of the politics on SEL. Our funding has been impacted because funders are like, do we fund, do we not? Is it, it's going to impact our brand? Or we really have needed a lot of support on communications. And it's we don't fund communication. There's some real issues we have had. And so it's almost like we're getting hit from all sides. And this is actually where working for an organization that focuses on social emotional skills is incredibly valuable. Because one of our 5 competencies is self-management. And we've had to practice that skill. One, as a leader, I have to model the discipline of when to act and react and when not to. And also as a team, we have had to, and we're having to on a daily basis say, we cannot move with emotion, we have to move with strategy. Because it is easy to get caught up in the emotions of it, and then you don't make good decisions. And responsible decision making is another one of our SEL competencies, which we also have to model right now every day. And so it is the very skills that we are wanting to make sure that kids have access to and practice in the classroom, that educators have professional development on, because if we don't feed the teachers, they will devour the children. So we know there's a level of support that our educators need as well. And so the very skills that we talk about, we try to embody every day in the work that we do. And so for us, it is understanding that right now we cannot move with emotion. We have to move with strategy. And while everyone else may be playing checkers, we have to look at this as a game of chess and be 2 and 3 steps ahead of it, regardless of what we're getting right now. And it is not easy. It's not easy for the teams either. It is a daily and sometimes a moment-by-moment play.
I'm going to go to the next question here, and there's 2 questions that are related, so I'm just going to say both of them.
Okay.
All right? And these are from our pushers in the room. Thank you. Thank you. Provocateurs, yes. How would you make your case for the outcomes you seek to a room full of folks that are currently supportive of the current administration's policy positions? How do we persuade? That's the first question. A related question, there seems to be an assumption that there are limited opportunities for left-right partnerships in pushing educational excellence. I'd push on this assumption. Is demonizing the right a missed opportunity?
So I can start with that. I'm happy to start with that. I mean, one of the things so first of all, I think that this is an incredible time for great opportunity to bring large swaths of people together across the political spectrum. And we see that in our work every day, that it transcends, like I said, the sort of notion of politics and the way that we see them. What we know about the American people and what is important that we continue to ground ourselves in is that the vast majority of the American people support public education, support people-centered policies, support things like diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility if you say the names of what they are as opposed to an acronym, right? Support basic fairness. They did not vote against, quote, democracy in the last election. They believed in some ways that threats to our democracy could not happen here. And what the ABC News polls and a range of polls across the political spectrum have shown in the last week and in the last months is that people, regardless of political affiliation, have deep concerns about things like due process being taken away from people. I represent men in who are Venezuelan, who have been removed from the country with no process at all, alongside our friends at the ACLU in the JGG case. And we have seen the American people, including those on a more conservative spectrum, including people like Joe Rogan, come out in the last month and say, wait a second, this is too far. So what we try to ground our work in and the opportunity in this moment is to actually focus on the things that unite so many people, including folks that may be seen as on different sides of a political spectrum. So to answer a question about how do you make your case in a room of people that support this administration's policy priorities, I would want to sort of challenge a premise of that question, which is that there are certainly people in this country, and many of us in this room, who believe that the public education system needs to be improved and in many instances is failing children and families in this country. Yeah. That's not a policy position of this administration. That's something that I think large swaths of the American people identify and agree with, right? There are certainly many people who believe that government should operate more effectively and efficiently and be modernized to actually meet our needs, right? And that we don't need to be defending systems and institutions that have not been delivering for people. That's probably a commonly held value. But we've seen no evidence that there is sort of broad scale support among people when they understand what the policies are for things like we are not going to provide education to every child in this country or those types of things. And so I think that there's an opportunity in this moment to listen, to hear, and to, in listening, finding people's commonality. And in many instances, that is what our cases have done and will do. And we are encouraging all the groups that we work with across the country to do that. So I think this is a moment where we really do get to transcend. And in listening, we can learn how to persuade. In exploiting overreach, that transcends politics, right? This isn't about a tax position or about a particular position. These are about fundamental things that have made our country grow and achieve and where it is. And so that's how we view this, and we're seeing just a tremendous opportunities. We are representing people on cases right now who are Republicans. We are representing religious leaders from a diverse range of religious groups, including evangelicals and communities across the South and the Midwest. And we're seeing this moment that there is this opportunity if we have the courage to see it and to take it.
I can keep this conversation going forever. Yes, thank you. Let's give it up for Skye. Sadly, we're at the end of our time, but I hope you all see the profiles and courage and leadership that are before you, and that you're taking something away with you to kind of guide you as you think about your next steps in your organization. So very, very quick, very, very short. I'd love for you just to tell me, what is one thing, this is the final audience question, what is one thing we should be doing right now? Folks are saying they're constantly getting questions like, what should we be doing right now in chats? What do you want to tell them? What should they do? What should they do today?
One thing today. I'm going to end with a quote because we are at time, but I did have something for the funders, but I'll find you. Leaders don't get to choose when chaos strikes, but they do get to choose how they will respond. Lead boldly. There are a lot of leaders right now that are leading boldly, and what we need the most is financial support from those funders to continue to do the work that we're doing every single day. And then 2, community. Send that text to that leader, make that phone call, give them a hug, encourage them, because without community, we will fail. So we need each other more than ever.
I was going to say the same thing. Refuse to be isolated. Defy attempts to polarize you, and build community, because that is what is going to create the courage to move forward. And both of us have websites of our organizations where there are lots of things that people can do, especially in this time with the stations that we're all in.
And with that, let's say a big thank you and give both Skye and Aaliyah a big round of applause.